Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hattie Brett, the editor of Grazia and the current chair of the BSME, and I want to thank you all for joining me for today's webinar, where I ask our esteemed panel for their tips on what publishing looks like in a post-pandemic world, because fingers crossed, we're almost there, I hope, and what an esteemed panel they are. First up, we have Jane Bruton, the deputy editor and head of lifestyle at the Telegraph, meaning all the magazines fall under her remit. We're also joined by Jaimie Kaffash, editor of Pulse, a monthly magazine that's been distributed to British GPs since 1960. AKA, Jaimie, you're the man that we can actually ask about what's going on with COVID. No pressure there. And finally, last but very much not least, we have Paul McNamee, editor-in-chief of The Big Issue, a magazine which, as we all know, helps give its homeless or at-risk vendors a really valuable source of income. So thank you all for joining me today. I'm pretty sure that everyone watching this today will have had some really tough moments during COVID, with restrictions forcing all editors to completely rethink their content, often from our kitchen tables with toddlers in tow, or maybe that was just me. But I think all of our struggles would pale into insignificance compared to The Big Issue, a title fundamentally sold on the streets, which is all about footfall. And obviously at a time when lockdown hit with no digital edition or subscriber base. So Paul, I want to start with you, if I may. In your entry for the BSME Awards earlier this year, you talked really powerfully about the fact that as soon as lockdown hit, you had to really quickly, like practically overnight, come up with ideas that would save the brand. Can you talk me through that process and what learnings you've taken away from it?
Well, I should say, first of all, I didn't do this on my own. That's important. None of us do this on our own. Yes, in that moment, this kind of moment of incredible disruption and potential catastrophe, you do face a real existential question, and you ask, what are we going to do? How can we exist? As you said in your intro, the big issue is there for its vendors, and if they can't sell on the street, what is the big issue? But we very quickly, over a weekend, in fact, changed everything. We said, right, if the vendors can't be there for now, we will be there for the vendors. We're there for the vendors always, but it's transactional to a degree. The vendors buy the magazine and sell it. If they couldn't do that, we would get the money to them. How do we do that? We immediately set up a subscription base. We very quickly, from really a base of basically nothing, we got to 10,000 very quickly. We did that without money, and we all know how expensive it can be to build up subscribers. We got into retail. Now, one of the benefits for The Big Issue is that other titles stopped producing with such frequency, so some retail slots opened up. Big supermarket chains helped us, Sainsbury's, Co-op, McCall's, latterly Tesco, and a few others, and we were able to go in there. We built an app. We started working on we called it a digital street corner, so that we had if vendors couldn't speak to the readers and the readers couldn't speak to vendors, we would do this digitally and remotely, which is what we did. We put this podcast together called The Big Issue. So we introduced a whole set of different adaptations really, really quickly in order to bring people to The Big Issue, to make them still able to interact with The Big Issue and get the money out. Over a year, through various lockdowns, we were able to get £1 million out to vendors.
Incredible.
Which it's quite something, considering that in one moment we thought we wouldn't be around for the next month, never mind a year, to do that. So, you know, that was a very important thing for us. And I haven't answered your other question about things that we can take away from that. I'm still not entirely sure. We're still going through that at the moment. One thing I suppose is that it showed on two sides of where we were digitally. One, not in a very good place, but two, that if you move quickly with a good strategy, you can build, and you can build quickly, you can adapt, and you can use that to plan for the future, how you're going to bring new readers in and how that will direct people to the magazine. So that is probably the first and primary one, but there's a host of others that I can return to. I should stop talking.
No, I mean, that's an incredible story, and congratulations to you and your team for such innovation and quick thinking. And I think it's really interesting to me that you talk about subscriptions and almost reaching that consumer and getting them to transact with you and knowing them better, because I know that's something lots of businesses are looking at the moment. And so, Jane, coming to you, I know at the Telegraph, attracting and engaging subscribers is one of your key focuses. How have you done that over this period, and what role do the magazines specifically play in attracting subscribers long term?
I think we were already in quite a good position digitally, in that we had an app, unlike Paul, and a lot of digital data, etc. But we just at the start of the pandemic, we started this system called we call it STARS, and it gives us a really good understanding of what our readers like and are engaging with. So it's not just about what they're clicking on; it's about what drives them to take out a subscription or a registration, how long they're engaging with that article, what they might be going on to read next. So if someone's into rugby, are they also into politics or whatever, and it's an instant. We have it on a big board in the newsroom. Not that there have been that many people in the newsroom to see it, but they can all see it digitally at home as well. And it really does give you, the importance of data and feedback and getting close to the reader. I mean, it's still, it's about knowing what your reader really, really wants and flexing really quickly, as Paul mentioned. When we realised lockdown was coming, so just before that, on the 17th of March last year, we ripped up our whole features section in the daily paper and made it into a "You Are Not Alone" section, which was included all of the lifestyle content, so culture features, and then plus podcasts. Think we did things like watch along movies with the film critic. We also set up WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups. The sports team even phoned readers, so they've done their phone numbers in. So it helped us get close to the readers and really understand what the readers wanted, and help really develop a community spirit. And probably, similar to Paul, raising that money, we linked up with a charity, Turn to Us, who are giving out grants, really quick grants, because a lot of people have been left in a situation whereby they, suddenly had no money coming in, and the response to that was brilliant from the readers as well. I think they raised like £1,200,000 in a matter of weeks. And in as far as magazine content goes as well, they were feeding into it. So we did a whole issue of Stella that was all about the NHS front line, and we worked with a photographer called Joanna Churchill, who took pictures of people on the front line, one of which ended up in the Duchess of Cambridge's exhibition, which was great. Everything was geared towards what the reader wanted. And a lot of the magazine content, we worked really hard to make that work digitally, and engage people as well. So, we've got a really good long format read technique. We work really hard on headlines. I think what I've learned most of all is the importance of digital publishing, and how, if you get that right, you can really engage and connect with readers in a way that that is different to print, but is equally as good quality.
And I guess that's your point about data meeting editorial instinct, that the two can and should work together to create great content.
Exactly. I think your instinct is, I mean, it's all about, always go with your instinct. And that was, we did that before. And, we realised as soon as lockdown hit, I mean, we were all, feeling really shocked by that. And the fact, it would leave a lot of people feeling really lonely, which is where You're Not Alone came from. And the data's there to sort of support your instinct. I mean, sometimes you might get it wrong, but, a lot of the time it just shows you that you are getting it right, rather than the old days of having to do, reader research, which used to take months. Do you remember that?
Yeah, or guesswork as often, like writing cover letters up. And Jaimie, coming to you on content, I suppose, you're in the position where you were used to at Pulse, breaking stories, medical campaigns, investigations. This was your world, but suddenly you're in an environment where COVID is a national talking point across every mainstream magazine, newspaper. How did you pivot your content as a result? And how did you make sure you were carrying on super serving your audience when COVID was everywhere?
I mean, first thing to say is we certainly haven't been short of content over the past year or so. Yeah. So that's one thing I can certainly say. So we were actually in a poor position where we lost 2 people just before we went into lockdown. They decided to leave, and we weren't able to fill those gaps. So we've been doing a lot of content with fewer people. I know that's true of many people, many publications at the moment, but obviously it hit us quite hard. We went from a point where we were putting out, say, 2 breaking news stories a week to 2 a day, basically, 2 or 3 a day. Luckily, I've had a fantastic news team who've just been completely on top of that. But we did actually change our content as well, and I made this really explicit in an editorial I did, actually. So whereas before, like everyone, we did these some titillating stories, Health Minister says something stupid about general practice. Now I actually said we're not going to be doing those anymore. Every news story, everything that we're putting out is going to be to help you, because you're not really interested in that at the moment. What you want to know is what the latest guidance is. So we're in a position where GPs being sent guidance from 100 different organisations at once. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that you get the guidance in the plainest possible language that you can, and in the most sort of bite-sized way you can as well. We're going to find out the most important points, and this is going to be our whole strategy from now on. And that really worked. It really worked. So we alongside a sort of change in our news strategy, we also brought in a resources page. So all the resources that you're being sent is going to be put on this page. I think it was hit and miss. It was really tough because unlike many readers and many other publications, our readership is bang in the middle of this. So to try and get all that guidance on a single page, for example, proved really tough. So then, we tried a different strategy. We looked at something that another GP was doing, so a website that she set up, which was, again, distilling all the guidance. We thought, actually, she's doing it better than we are. We aren't medically trained. We aren't clinically trained. So we got in discussion with her. From her point of view, she had the same aims as we did, to try and educate GPs, to try and give them guidance. I think that's the word I'm really looking for, give them guidance. So we got into, we struck a deal with her, agreement with her. So now we're hosting her website on our own website. So I think that's sort of been our strategy for the whole past year. Instead of for want of a better way of putting it, instead of chasing clicks, we have been making sure that the stuff that we're doing is really useful to our readership. Ironically, that has led to traffic that we've never seen before. I mean, it's absolutely incomparable, the traffic that we're getting now compared to the traffic we were getting before the pandemic. There's been, I'd say, a 5-fold increase on a daily basis of traffic, which has been pretty impressive. And we know that these are GPs looking at as well. So, quite rambly answer there, but I think this change in strategy was something that we can take forward as well. We do still do the Matt Hancock says something stupid type stories. That's still something that we'll do from now on. But the idea that what we're doing is distilling everything for our readership and to make it as easy for them to process as possible is something I think we're going to take into the future as well. It's not something we're going to change.
So I guess all of you have talked about audience first, understanding what the audience needs, whether it's guidance or physical help or a sense of community, and then working your platforms as hard as possible to deliver on that. Paul, how important is it for a modern magazine brand to feel like it's campaigning almost on behalf of its audience and its readership?
Well, I think from a broad perspective, and I can't speak for all publications, and I will speak specifically about the big issue in a second, but from a broad perspective, I think the world has changed to the point where we look at what people are doing differently. And I know that sounds very broad, but if you think that previous to lockdown, we were all, particularly working in journalism, we were going to a place, we were commuting, we were going to a place to work, and we didn't necessarily always see the detailed things that were going on in our local community. And I think that what lockdown has done is it's allowed people in their local areas to focus on their local areas, to see the good that people are doing, and also to see the wrong things that are happening, so they become more attuned to it and want to do something about it and say something about it and bring their readers along, either speak for them or give them a platform to speak. At the big issue, we've always been slightly campaigny anyway. You know, we've looked for something to get our teeth into. We want to give voice to those who don't have a voice. We want to make sure that we're not seen as an establishment figure. We want to change for the better. That's what draws people to a degree to the big issue. One thing that this has done is, I suppose, for the last 30 years, the big issue has been about the vendors. It's been giving them opportunity. It's been providing them with a product that they can go out and sell. Fantastic magazine, clearly. But a lot of time the medium is the message. Seeing the vendor, that is how people feel that they're doing something about poverty. What we realise now, and where we're going to go next in terms of campaigning, is looking at people, or for people, I think, who were previously big issue readers, because there could be, and we fear it, a real tsunami of job losses which could lead to deep poverty and homelessness. The impact of that on the individual is huge. The impact on their families is huge. It could have mental scars that will take a generation to heal. And the price for society is massive. Not just trying to house people, but trying to pay for them to stay in homelessness. So what we will do as an organisation, as a magazine and broader, is campaign on behalf of those people, work out ways that we can make sure that the government supports them to stay in their homes, works out ways that investment comes in for jobs. We will, in essence, become a campaigning and advocate organisation for our readers as much as for the people who were selling the magazine.
Yeah, that's a really interesting pivot and a valuable one. And I guess, it's a pertinent reminder for me as well about what we do isn't just words and pictures on a page, is it? It can have a really powerful society impact, which is important to remember. I also want to pick up on, your point about in the old world, we were going here and coming back here. We're obviously, most of us, I think, on this webinar at home. So we're no longer going here, coming there. We're working from home in the short term. Jane, you're the exception to that rule. You're one of the few editors who's remained in the office throughout the whole of lockdown. I think you've gone from like 1,500 people in the newsroom to a handful of people there now. How has that experience been for you, and what does the future of the Telegraph office and remote working look like?
There have been, obviously it's been really difficult in lots of ways, both for the people who are in the office and for the people who are at home. But there have been loads of positives as well. Like we as everyone did, we flexed so quickly. 1 minute, we had a huge newsroom. The next minute, everyone's at home. We're all on Slack. There's team meetings going on all over the place, and and keeping that, I think the team have reacted really brilliantly to that, and managed to keep up morale, and all the editors of the different sections have managed to do that. for me, I found it really difficult. If I was at home, there was one couple of weeks when I was at home quarantining, and it's just really very difficult when you're in a daily newsroom, because things don't happen from conference to conference. So you might have a news conference, but then before the next news conference, hundreds of things could have changed, and so it's very difficult to not be here. So, for instance, on Saturday we were covering the funeral of Prince Philip. And pictures only started coming in at like 3:30, and we had to be off Stone at 7:30. We had a designer at home, so it's much harder than it would normally have been. But then again, it's inspirational, because we realised that we can do that. So we can cover massive events, we can cover huge COVID announcements, Christmas being cancelled, royal funerals. It's shown that we can do that. In terms of coming back to the office, we've got more people in than we did when we were down to the minimum, but it's still very quiet. It's hard to sort of to predict, really, because until we have the government guidelines about what might be said about spacing, etc., we can't really make any plans. But I'm very mindful of the fact that people are in different circumstances. Especially some of the younger team, they might be in a rented house trying to work from their bedroom. They want to be in here learning from, if you want to be a crime reporter, you want to be here with the crime, the chief crime reporter. It's very difficult for them, especially, I think. But then there are other roles that have always been out of the office. So columnists, for instance, have always worked from home. Writers, it's much more easier to work from home. People who have to generate ideas, I think that's much harder. And, I personally, and I know a lot of my team, find it much easier when we're bouncing ideas around together. So there isn't one size fits all. So there isn't, that solution. And I think it will be a sort of gradual and phased return, but we're lucky because we've got a huge newsroom and we've got the space to do that, and a lot of people haven't, I know, so that makes it very difficult. If you've got a small office, that's a logistical nightmare, really.
Nightmare. Yeah. A work in progress, should we say.
Yeah.
Jaimie, what have you learned from remote working that you're going to be taking forward into this brave new world?
So I'm just following from Jane's point. I think it's really interesting. I think, for the likes of Telegraph, the big issue, these are household names, people know about them. For us, I think what we've learned is that if we have to offer some flexibility going forward. Before the pandemic, I don't know, we had fairly strict working from home policy. I think post-pandemic, it looks likely, like many places, we will absolutely have to have a completely flexible working arrangement. We're not going to be able to attract people if we don't. Having said that, I would say that, like Jane said, I think younger people are probably more seem to be more eager to come back into the office. For me, the big learning is that actually it's the newer members of staff. I think it's being able to onboard them, getting them trained up. That's proved a lot more difficult working from home. Actually, going to print, and we're actually on press today, hasn't been as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I could see, even when things are back to normal, it could be times when we could still be sending it to print from home. We've shown it can be done. So, can we really put that genie back in the bottle now? But I think, like I said, for me, the one thing I really learned is that being in the office is pretty essential for new members of staff to see how everything works, to buzz off each other. Like Jane said, the crime reporter working with a senior crime reporter, that kind of stuff is invaluable, and that's something that I think we're going to have to we're going to have to learn those lessons in the future as well. But having that kind of physical, having everyone in the office for that, and to learn from each other is really important. I can see when we go back into the office, there will be days when we will all be in the office. We'll have a set day when everyone will be in the office, because I do think those days still are important. It has worked. It's worked absolutely fine. Even going to print has worked absolutely fine. But, there are sometimes I think being in the office, just being able to speak to somebody about this line would be so much easier than just sending a Teams message or an email, etc., etc. So I would say that's what I've learned. If we do have new members of staff, they need to be in the office. They need to be buzzing off everyone else. And we can't have a 5 days a week, every 52 weeks a year.
So a hybrid model for you?
I mean, I think, it absolutely has to be, I think we have to offer flexibility, or else we won't get the staff. They'll go elsewhere. But also I think we need to be able to at least be able to bounce off each other as well.
And Paul, I know we've talked about this a lot, but I do think it's something all editors are thinking with and grappling with. What's your quick take on remote working and learnings and opportunities?
Well, I don't like it. I don't like it at all, but clearly it can be done. And we've all had to do it. Jane's illustrated, Jaimie's explained how it has worked. I echo what Jaimie said about trying to bring new staff members in. That is a tricky thing to do. There's a digital editor who we have now who has never... Oh, no, actually, he met me once, which was obviously a thrill for him, but he hasn't met in person anybody else in the team. That's really not a way to function. So we will, and we plan to have some kind of hybrid model. I don't think everybody will ever be back in the office, not in the near future all the time, but we're working on who's going to be in which days, when people need to send magazine, on particular press day, when the news team needs to be in for digital, just working through those details. But I think I like the rush to deadline and to print, and I miss not being able to stomp around an office and point at screens.
Yeah, just having some chat off screen, right? And there's actually a question that's come in about remote working, and this reminds me, to anyone watching who has a question, please do stick it in the chat or the Q&A functionality, and I will go to them. But this question from Tim around, Jaimie, to your point about younger staff members and Paul's, it's challenging not being in the office. What about work experience programs and the talent of tomorrow? Has anyone done remote work experience sessions and has learnings on that they could share?
We've actually got someone in work experience in the office now. Well, in a remote office, obviously, and it has been tougher. We'll have a debrief for her at the end of the day, but I'm at the end of her time. But I don't think it is as. I don't think you do get as much out of remote work experience as you do in the office. I think that's just a fact of life. I think, again, to reiterate that point, I think when there are new members of staff, younger members of staff, I would make an effort to go in the office more often and speak to them and make sure that they're being onboarded. In terms of work experience, yes, it can be done remotely, but it really isn't ideal. I think being in the office and getting a buzz of a newsroom and buzz of a magazine, to me, that's when I did work experience, that was almost more valuable than anything else.
Yeah.
We have graduate trainees here, and we made it priority for the last year's grad trainees to be back in the office more quickly than anyone else when we got people back in summer. And then this year's grad trainees who started in January, they came into the office for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's essential for them. It's just impossible for them to learn from home. They're going from department to department, and that they need to be with people in order to learn quickly. There's just so I think it's they are one of our priorities actually.
It's interesting to know. And we've talked about a virtual world in terms of impact on team. What about consumers? There's been lots of virtual events in all different sectors over this period. Assuming that physical events might come back but might be tricky, do people have plans to include virtual events in your business models going forward? Jane, do you want to start with that? Because you've done some, haven't you?
Yes, definitely. I was just talking to Caroline, the editor of Stella, about the next Stella Live, which we've focus to be around, coming out of lockdown, so around the 21st of June. So it's again, it's kind of like, channeling, what those readers are thinking about and worrying about, and they might be thinking about, what they're going to wear, where they're going to go, anxiety about, re-entering the workplace, getting on a train, or whatever. But one of, a really great positive thing, that because we had to do last year Still Alive remotely as well, a really good positive that came out of that was that we were able to reach readers all around the country, and a lot of them said, we would never have come to London for the live event, but we've been able to join in from Scotland, wherever, Manchester, Leeds, etc. And I think the other thing that we learned was that people want things that they can join in with, so they don't. That we've all had enough of Zoom quizzes and watching people on a Zoom screen. So live demonstrations, questions like you've got coming up here today. Cook-alongs, whatever, they things that they can get involved in and feel involved in are really, really important.
That's interesting. So
I think we will always have a virtual aspect to any live event that we do from now onwards, I would imagine.
Jaimie, forgive me for not knowing this, but have you guys delved into virtual events?
Yeah, we've been doing pretty well on them, actually. So our event team got on this quite early. We are also, we're even exploring the idea of setting up our own virtual events platform as well. So we are very much involved in this. I'll be honest. I think there is a place to play. There is a space for virtual events in the future. I still think that as soon as we can go back into physical events, then it's something that we're missing. I would say both in terms of commercially, but also I think in terms of our brand as well. I know that many people connect with Pulse, for example, through Pulse Live. For them, it's a chance to go down to London and have a bit of a knees up for many of them, I think, and a network as well. And I think this was lost. We have been holding Pulse Live, our main event, online. It's been, instead of being a 2-day thing, we've done a 6-week event, seminars spread across those 6 weeks, which have been working really well. But it's not the same. I think most people would acknowledge that. In the way I see it in the sort of in the near future is that there will be a line between the big events, the big showpiece events, and the smaller ones that we do, the seminars for 25 people. I think those can be done online. There's no reason not to be done online, and it will save everyone quite a bit of money. We can still sell that to advertisers very well. But for an event of 2,000, 3,000 people, they're not. I'm not saying anything that's not obvious here, but they're not in it just to learn more about child health. They're in it to see friends, to network. But another thing that we've done, we have actually launched a round table as well, and I was determined to do this before any lift on restrictions, because now we can do it at our remote round table. Bringing 8 GPs down to London, that costs us money. I'm not going to lie. It's to be able to do that online. We've just cut our costs completely. So now we can have it as a remote round table, and no one will think any differently of it. So, I do think there's going to be that line between the big showpiece events and the smaller events, round tables, the seminars for 25 people. I don't see why these necessarily need to be done in person anymore.
So a hybrid model again.
Yeah. Bit of a theme.
So diving into some questions now. Paul, I'm going to come to you first with this one, giving you a heads up. This says, hi guys, I've started my own indie publication some time ago, starkmag.co.uk, which looks good, so we should check it out. But because of the lack of resources, I literally run it on my own. I'm struggling. How would I go about growing my team to be able to grow the magazine itself? Doing it on my own is overwhelming and not realistic. Paul, advice.
Well, right. Before I go to that, I just wanted to say something about the live aspect and live events, because the big issue, as we're structured differently, I think every sale on the street is a live event for the big issue. So returning to the street has been a big thing for 1,500 initially, people, vendors in England and Wales. So we had to find a way to make an event of this return and all these individual events. We had to make sure that you can't do this particular, well, you can do it, I suppose, remotely, but you can't have that interaction with the human being. So we have to make sure that the vendors had all the PPE that they needed, that they, as much as possible, were able to take cashless payments, that this interaction could happen and was very real. So we are returning to live events. I'm very keen to maintain our return to live events. In terms of advice on starting your own magazine, many years ago, I started a magazine with Colin Murray, who is now, he's a great broadcaster and a great sports broadcaster, in Belfast. And we didn't know what we were doing at all. And we got some money from different places, and we did all sorts of hands across the community money, because I'm Catholic, he's Protestant, so we played all that card shamelessly. And the one thing that I would say is try and have fun, because we didn't know what we were doing. It taught us a lot that helped us in our career subsequently. But for about a year, we just had a brilliant time. And that isn't particularly good business advice, but it may be that particular magazine, it may be that is the future, or it may be that it leads somewhere. But in the moment, just find a way to try and enjoy it, because there'll be enough difficulties coming. And everybody will advise on how to commission and how to pay and how to deal with whatever platform you're using, or printers, or whatever it is. You know, there's a host of these things. You will learn them as you go, but just try and enjoy the moment.
Okay, I like that advice. Have fun. And you'll see that fun in the pages and in the content as well. Another question that's coming from Eve, similar to the question we had before, but what do you think the journalism landscape will look like for new journalists actively seeking jobs in an industry that, as we all know, has suffered job losses and magazine closures as a result of the pandemic? Will there be opportunities as the industry recovers, and what can people do to put themselves in the best position possible? Jane, coming to you first on that.
I think it's a really exciting time, actually. I think, from our point of view, we've started, our subscriber strategy. So, and that's been really successful. So people are paying for journalism that, would have been free online a few years ago. We've upped our subscriber base from just over 400,000 to over 600,000 in the last year. We've brought our print publishing team back into the office. They were out. A lot of them were outsourced before, so that's created 24 new jobs. I think I think I mentioned earlier, the digital publishing side of things has become so important, and that's it's not just kind of like taking a feature and putting it up online. It's editing that feature, and adding things to that feature that make it really readable and engaging for the audience. So I feel like that's a really exciting opportunity. We're moving away from self-publishing. Hopefully, we won't be doing any more self-publishing, but we definitely won't by the end of the year. So, this creates more opportunity as well. So you've got, your commissioners, your writers, and it's all about, the quality of the commissioning and talking to what the digital publisher or editor might need. So I think the landscape is changing, but it's broadening out, and there's, people, want quality reads in whatever sector you're in, and will and are increasingly willing to pay for that, which is great, I think.
Okay, so some optimism there, which is a good place to be in, I guess. Encouraging to hear. And I always get told off for running these sessions late. So I'm going to not do that this time, or try not to. And I want to give you all time to ask my last cerebral question, as it were. So to wrap up, I suppose, what have you all, what's the greatest lesson that you've all learned from publishing in lockdown? And what will you never, ever go back to doing again? Jaimie, starting with you on press day. Is this a good day to ask you this? Oh, you're muted, Jaimie. Sorry.
One thing I'll never do again is go on mute again when I'm not supposed to. So I'd say what I've learned is that the relationship with the read. Let me put it in another way, actually. I think we underestimate how important journalism can be to people. Now, what you'd find as journalism, that can change, but if you're talking about news reporting or analysing complicated subjects, I think quite a lot of publications would say that they've seen an increase in traffic. People, certainly around March 2020, when we judge the BSME awards, you can see that pretty much everyone saw an uptick in traffic around that time. When there is a crisis like this, then people do look to journalism to help out. Obviously there's still incredible problems within journalism, but we do still we do still provide a public service. I think that needs to be remembered, really. And that journalism, I know this, how punchy this sounds, but we are an important part of society. And for me, this is something that is shown in the pandemic. Now, obviously, in the case of Pulse, we've got there's a very obvious reason for us during this time, because our readers are bang in the middle of it. But I think whatever publication you're in, this has provided quite a lot of support in a number of ways. I mean, you just need to listen to Jane and Paul to hear that, especially, that there are plenty of ways that you can support your readers and be a force for good in their lives, basically. So how do we take that forward? Again, as I said, in terms of Pulse, we aren't going to be going back to the real, well, this is going to get us a lot of clicks, let's go to this. We just do what we think the readers need, and they will come, basically. I think that's the one thing I'm going to take out of this, that you provide readers with what they need, as well as what that titillates them and what they want, then you'll see an increase in traffic, and stick with that. It is often quite a task to try and tell this to commercial teams, and I think we've probably all had this kind of problem before, but we know what readers want, and more importantly, we know what they need. If we can continue providing what they need and what's useful for them, I think there's going to be a place for magazines forever, basically. So what will we not go back to doing again? I think it's been wrapped up in that answer as well, is chasing clicks. If you just offer what is necessary and what is needed, you don't need to be doing these titillating stuff, these those awful headlines, headlines you'll never believe what X said. Hopefully I'd like to think that as editors we'll be moving away from that. We don't need to. Just provide what readers need and they will come.
I love that. Really cool. That's a good right. What answers need. Think about that. I've started to be echoing. Is that just me? Paul, coming up.
I have thought about this a lot, because it's been in my mind that it's something that we were going to discuss today. I don't think there's any one particular thing that I won't do again, because as editors, I think all of us have a certain amount of ego. You need a certain amount of ego to believe that your decision is best. And also it helps, as armor against whatever else is going to come when you put the title, publication, whatever it is out. But that ego, I think, sometimes when people have asked, what is it you do as an editor? If everybody else is doing all the work, what is it you do? And I think sometimes it is just making a decision. Ultimately, somebody has to decide. And the ego previously has meant that decision is, maybe as Jane touched on, the instinct. You think, well, no, I know what I'm doing, and that's the way it's going to be. And if lockdown and COVID has taught anything, it's just be open. You, as an editor, of course, you have to make a decision. Of course, the thing lands on you, and you've got to carry that in the back of your mind all the time. This is on you, but you need to allow other ways of working. Sometimes you do not always know best. Allow people to come and don't terrify them into the corner. I think that just be open and don't be fearful. Because you've done it for a long time and it's worked doesn't mean that it's going to work again.
I like that. Embrace the change.
Yeah.
Jane, coming to you.
Yeah, well, I agree with all of those things. I think I've definitely learned that less is more, that investing in really good quality journalism is more important, as I think Jaimie said, than putting up similar, often people will jump on, especially when there's one big story in town, different departments will jump on that story, but you have to work out what is the best way of tackling that and really go with that and promote that and be confident with that, rather than having lots of little, similar themed features or whatever around, diluting what is your big hero piece. I think that's important. And the other thing I've learned is, it was getting increasingly important anyway, but the importance of our early conference, our first digital 8:30 conference of the day, and I have a lifestyle conference just a little bit earlier than that to feed into it. So that conference has now become the most important meeting for me of the whole day, every day. Whereas before, so I don't think what I won't be doing anymore is strolling in to my first meeting at 10, unfortunately, unless I've got a really bad hangover, in which case I probably will do that.
Okay, so early starts, and I definitely think hard work. I mean, I've never worked as hard as I've worked over the last year and a half. Built on. Thank you guys so much for joining me and for so much brilliant advice. I'm kind of always amazed by these, how inspirational I find it, and how much of a great reminder it is of the beauty and power of what we do. So thank you so much. And I should also remind you that our BSME Talent Awards are coming up on the 1st of July. So I know you all have entered. Thank you so much. But keep an eye on our social channels for more information about joining us for that event and for the next upcoming webinars. And that's it from me. Thanks to those behind the scenes at the BSMEs, especially our brilliant interns who are great. And thanks again to all of my brilliant panelists. Thank you.